What's up, everybody? What's up? Welcome back to another Legal Hands to the Face podcast. We got a great guest today, the one and only Johnny Marks from Marks Reese on WIP. What's up, John?
What is up? How are you? This is not functional. It's purely aesthetic. So if you see the microphone, it's just so I look as official as Bill here. So there you go.
Well, you got that recognizable voice that everybody in Philly knows, man.
Well, I mean, hope so. I hope so. It's getting there. It's not quite the Ike Reese voice or the Merrill Reese voice, of course, but yeah, hopefully some people recognize it.
Yeah. So how is it working with Ike, man? He seems like he's a great dude on the air.
Yeah, he's if you didn't know that he was an NFL player and he played for the Eagles and was in the NFL Pro Bowl 9 years, you would think he was just a guy that got in the radio out of college. So sometimes you forget, and then when you're talking football and you're like, oh, actually, this guy played for Nick Saban at Michigan State and played for Andy Reid with the Eagles. So and I've worked with over my years, I've worked with a lot of athletes, and for the most part, like the athlete that goes from the field wants to more or less kind of come in and sit down, and they're the expert. They're not planning the show or anything like that. And those guys don't typically last long because that's not really what works. That's not gonna work. Ike, from the day he stepped off the field and started doing radio, did it like any other person that was doing radio. So I respect him. He did nights at WIP by himself, 10P to 2A, Ike at night. And I can just tell you from experience of working nights, you may think that just go on the air at WIP and you get phone calls. It doesn't work like that, right? Like unless something major happens, like Eagle season, it's easy to get phone calls, or if there's a big story that's going on. But if you're in the middle of summer and you're waiting for training camp to start and you're doing Phillies like kind of day by day, man, you got to work hard to get phone calls. And Ike from 10P to 2A, man down WIP back in the AM days. So I respect him a great deal as a radio host, and it's a lot of fun working with him every day.
Yeah, well, you guys do a great job. No joke. I mean, you guys, I really enjoy listening to you. I know a lot of people in Philly do as well. You do an awesome show.
Thank you.
And I've been listening to you, and I wanted to bring you on because I wanted to have a little bit of Eagles talk. We're in that lull right now. It's the off season. There's not much going on, but the Philadelphia Eagles talk never stops, which is great about the city of Philadelphia. I mean, we love our Eagles. But you guys have been talking a lot about Jalen Hurts and whether or not he's an elite quarterback. Where would you rank him with the top quarterbacks in the NFL? And I'm going to ask you flat out now, I mean, where do you rank Jalen Hurts in the NFL when it comes to these other quarterbacks?
I think you have three quarterbacks. You have Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow, and you can probably, that was in no particular order. Burrow and Allen, it seems like a lot of people think Josh Allen had a down year, and he had some big interceptions in fourth quarters, and he didn't play well. They didn't play well in their home playoff game. But end of their season was derailed by Damar Hamlin. You forget that their home field was affected by it as well. And so, like, you win 13 games, and I think you had 34 touchdowns and 44,000 some odd yards or whatever. But anyway, you have Josh Allen, you have Joe Burrow, you have Pat Mahomes. And I think that next spot is kind of reserved as a fluctuating spot, right? Like right now, I think it's very easy, and I would say Jalen Hurts. And Jalen's close to those guys. He just hasn't had multiple seasons in a row where you're like, damn, that dude's good, or damn, the Eagles are winning because of him. Not the Eagles are winning and he's their quarterback. No, like he's a big reason why the Eagles are as successful as they are. But I saw Lamar Jackson do the same thing in his MVP season. I've seen other quarterbacks that kind of go from, wow, he's the third best quarterback, and then next year in the rankings he's 10th or he's 8th or he's 7th. So right now Jalen Hurts is on the outside looking in, just on the outside of, you can either say he's tier 2 or he's the bottom of tier 1. But I mean, Justin Herbert hasn't won squat. He's an impressive quarterback, but now he goes from prospect to like, hey, man, you got to start winning. I don't want to hear about your head coach. I don't want to hear you have weapons. You got to go out there and win. So he goes from prospect darling to now you got to win, at least in my eyes. And really kind of Josh Allen's got to do that too. I know he was very close to beating Kansas City. Maybe he wins a Super Bowl if he does that a couple of years ago, but he hasn't. So it's nothing to sneeze at. I know people will be mad. They're like, oh, you're being negative on Jalen Hurts. I don't think it's fair to put him in that same category as those other quarterbacks just yet.
And I don't necessarily disagree with your rankings there, but one of the things that bothers me that I think a lot of people, when they talk negatively about Jalen Hurts, is they talk about how he's surrounded with so much talent. But when you look at these other guys, I mean, they all have talented players. I mean, Joe Burrow, yeah, he's in Cincinnati, not necessarily known as one of the most historic franchises when you compare him to what the Eagles have done. But the guy's got probably the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are studs. But you look at what this guy has in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase.
Right.
I mean, my goodness.
And then Tyler Boyd, too.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd's good. He's a stud. I mean, you look at these guys that they have, and then even Josh Allen. I mean, he has Stephon Diggs. We'll see whether or not Diggs plays this year. But these guys are all surrounded by talent. So I just don't like the fact that Hurts sometimes, that's the knock on him is, oh, well, look at all the talent he has. Everybody has talent. The only quarterback I remember in Philadelphia really succeeding without talent around him was McNabb. I mean, he had Westbrook, but they never gave the guy any good wide receivers outside of T.O.
Only got you to so far, right? Like, no coincidence they finally make the Super Bowl when they signed T.O. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, you're absolutely right. And look at the jump that Tua made last year with Miami. He has the second year of Jalen Waddle, and you get the Tyreek Hill, the biggest weapon in football. So that's why even last year, when I remember when Tyreek Hill got traded to the Chiefs, and it kind of came off to a lot of people as me being fake pissed off radio host because I went on the air and I was like, what the hell are the Eagles doing? They got him for a second round draft pick. Oh, well, they weren't going to sign him to that contract, and they're fine. No, they're not fine in the NFL. And I know Kansas City does it a little bit differently. They still have Travis Kelce. But you need weapons. This is a throwing league. You can't win with B-level wide receivers. You need A-level wide receivers. Not even just one anymore. You need two above average wide receivers. I feel like they're still kind of thin on wide receivers with only having Quez Watkins as their third receiver. But I guess Dallas Goedert makes up for it. Jalen's got great weapons. Honestly, bro, the only thing I worry about with Jalen this year is playing a more difficult schedule. Their defense not being as good. And, do I think he's going to regress? I think we're going to, at the end of the season, we're going to come out and we're going to say Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback. Maybe he's not going to have top 5 numbers every single year, but there's just a certain feel to him that if you give him the ball last in a game and you need a drive, he's going to get you a drive. And that's the most comforting thing in sports, is knowing that you have a guy that can win when it matters. And he showed that this year.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, you look at what he did in the Super Bowl. They're down 8. He brings them down, scores the touchdown, gets the 2-point conversion. That's, regardless of what you thought about that holding call on James Bradbury, that's what was so frustrating, is I just wanted to see, give Jalen Hurts a chance with the ball in his hands at the end of the game. Can he come down and either tie it up or win it? And I think he would have. I really do.
I do too.
He wants the ball, and that is something that you definitely want. But, you talk about Jalen Hurts and whether or not he regresses. I was listening to you today on the radio, and one of the things you were talking about was you'd like if Jalen Hurts would stop running the ball so much, because he hasn't been able to finish the last 2 seasons. He hasn't been able to finish the regular season because of injuries. My only concern there, though, is I agree with you. You got to do things to try to keep this guy healthy, because if he gets hurt, we're not going to the Super Bowl last year. I agree. But he accounts for about 50 yards a game on the ground. I mean, he had 760 rushing yards last year. You break that down in 15 games, that's 50 yards a game. So where are we getting that additional 50 yards a game if you take the ball out of his hands to run the ball?
Well, I would actually say keep the ball in his hands and have him throw for that, or divvy it up. Does that mean he throws the ball 4 more times a game or 5 more times a game, and then Swift gets a carry or 2, Boston Scott gets a carry or 2? Here's my main point, and it's not Jalen runs too much, F him. Why is he running so much? It's really not that. The scrambles, perfectly fine with. That's a play breaking down. Called runs. It's really more for the Eagles and towards the Eagles than it is for Jalen Hurts. Sirianni in the offseason has talked about not wanting to change anything about Jalen. They view his legs and his running ability and how they use him as an asset to the offense. And unless they're lying, they're going to continue to do that. My only concern is having called run plays. I'm just telling you. I know how Josh Allen stayed healthy with his usage and the contact he takes on. He's big,
Yeah,
but
he's a big
still,
dude.
that doesn't matter. Jalen's a pretty big dude too. It's inevitable you're going to get injured, and he's not. When he runs, he's smart about it. He doesn't take unnecessary hits. He gets out of bounds. He's everything that you want from a quarterback that is mobile, and able to make plays. I'm not trying to turn him into Eli Manning or a pocket quarterback. Just saying, the last 2 years, at the end of the season, he was banged up, and I don't know if that gets better with age. I think a natural development of Jalen Hurts is to throw the ball a little bit more, right? Like as you're trending away from being a younger quarterback, as you understand the offense in the league more, you should be throwing the ball more. He's a quarterback, not a running back. So I don't need him rushing 165 times this year.
165. Yep.
Yeah, 165. Some are kneel downs, some are the tush and push, some are goal line touchdowns. But that's still 45 more times than the next closest quarterback, who also have the same things with kneel downs and things like that. So I just want to push it down a little bit. I want him to be healthy. This team is going to make or break based on Jalen Hurts.
My only concern, and I don't disagree with you trying to keep the guy healthy, my only concern is with the type of offense that the Eagles run, and it's that RPO offense, you have to be able to pull the ball at the quarterback if the read tells you to pull the ball. So, I mean, they really would have to change the offense quite a lot to say, hey, we don't want Jalen Hurts running that much, because now the RPO, and I've heard you talk about it before, is you're gonna take what the defense is giving you. So if the defense is giving you the quarterback run, you got to take it, or the RPO doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. Well, look at when Gardner Minshew had to start last year, the running game looked like a totally different running game because they knew Gardner Minshew wasn't going to run. So why would they have to account? You're right. Jalen Hurts makes the running backs better. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's an argument that you use him in the best way you can use him, like you've been using him. And you know what? If he keeps getting banged up, then you change. But don't change until it works. That's what I think the Eagles are going to do this year.
Yeah, I mean, and something Sirianni says, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but something Sirianni says a lot too is that a lot of times you see the injuries happening on sacks, not quarterback runs. But when you're exposing your quarterback that much on these runs, it's only like we saw in Chicago. It's inevitable. Someone's going to fall on him the wrong way. Something's going to happen. But yeah, we'll see.
And that play, I actually went back. I found it, and that wasn't even an RPO. That was a zone read. So he was either giving it to the running back or he was keeping it. He kept it and tried to go around right end, and it wasn't a vicious hit. But when you get a 300-pounder that's deciding he's going to lay on you and he's going to drive you into the ground, that's what happened. So like Ike even said this at the beginning of today's show, is that as a defensive player, and now especially because the bullseye is on the Eagles and Jalen Hurts' jersey because they're the best team in the NFC and they just went to the Super Bowl, is how do you stop Jalen Hurts? Well, if he's going to hurt the defense by running the ball, now they're going to try to hurt him. So just keep that in mind. You leave the pocket, you don't have the same protections. And you're right, quarterbacks get injured in the pocket all the time, but when you leave the pocket, you don't have the same kind of protections. So I just worry about the defenses out there saying, "Yeah, we're gonna take them out of the game."
You said you went back and watched that today, and that just goes to show too how tough Hurts is. Because what he did after he got hurt on that drive is he threw some beautiful passes, man, and he was in pain.
And he ran too. That was it. I didn't remember the drive. They started at the 4-yard line. I forget how many plays it was, like a 15-play drive. And they ended up missing a field goal. So the drive ended with a Jake Elliott missed field goal. But you look at that drive, it's like Jalen Hurts scramble, Jalen Hurts run, Jalen Hurts pass. To your point where you're talking about the usage of Jalen Hurts, I mean, who rivals him? Josh Allen? That's about it for what he means to the offense. Josh Allen's the only other guy that I can do. Obviously, Pat Mahomes too, but they use him so much in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what Sirianni and the offense puts together this year. I mean, one of the difficult things, though, is they're going to have to try to change this offense a little bit, and you got a whole new offensive coordinator. I know he was there last year. I know he was the quarterback coach, but he hasn't called plays since I think he was at Florida, and I don't think he's ever called plays in the NFL. So I'm interested to see what type of offense they have this year.
Yeah, he hasn't. I wouldn't expect a ton of change just because, like you said, this isn't an experienced offensive coordinator that comes in and maybe wants to put his little wrinkle on it, which I think is a good thing. It's certainly not broken. the trust that Jalen has with Brian Johnson, the new offensive coordinator, is also great. But to your point, having experience calling plays and calling 2-minute drills and knowing what to do before half, and Sirianni can help out. He's an offensive head coach. He should be able to, but just getting in a rhythm of calling plays, right? Like, it's not I don't know how easy that is to do without experience. So we're going to find out, because if it doesn't work, he's going to hear it, and then Sirianni's going to hear it, because he's the offensive head coach that really should be able to call plays.
Yeah, and Steichen was a great play caller. I mean, you saw what he did in I guess it was L.A. with the Chargers, and then with the Eagles last year. So hopefully Brian Johnson steps in and we don't miss a beat, but that's definitely a big question mark. I mean, what else are you concerned about this year? I mean, there's some positions on this team I know I have concerns for, but what are you concerned about going into 2023? Obviously, it's a difficult schedule, but what positions do you think they're weak at that you're a little bit nervous about?
I'm not worried about the offense at all. This is defensive worry. And part of what made the Eagles special last year was they played complementary football. Their defense was excellent. Their passing defense was excellent. We know what they did as far as getting to the quarterback, and we know what they did on offense, but you also look at who they played. And you only play who they play. I get that. But you look at who they played, and the best quarterback they played, I guess, was Aaron Rodgers or maybe Kyler Murray, but he was terrible last year. So it's going to be much different this year. That patch in the middle towards the end of the season where you're playing
starting in week 9.
It's unbelievable, right?
Week 8 against Dallas, and then they get their bye, and then they go Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas. I mean, it's a mess.
At Seattle. Yeah, I mean, so it's tough. So I worry about that. And you know what? Last year, they were able to get pressure on the quarterback in most games, if not all games. And what made them the most successful defense that I can remember since maybe even going back to the Buddy Ryan or the Bud Carson defense is being able to get to the quarterback. We know it's so important. We know it was what they needed and what their defense was built on when they won the Super Bowl. So I worry that maybe it's not as easy. Maybe Brandon Graham doesn't get double-digit sacks. It almost looked easy last year. So I worry about that, and I worry about the overall Super Bowl hangover. There's been 2 teams since 1991 that have come back after losing the Super Bowl and go back to another Super Bowl. The Bills did it 3 times, 91, 92, 93, and then the Patriots in 2018 just did it. But if nothing else, it shows you that the Super Bowl hangover is real. And there's a lot of teams that can make it to the Super Bowl. There's not a lot of teams that can make it back the next year. Same thing with winning a Super Bowl 2 years in a row. It's really, really tough. So those, it's not tangible. It's not something I can say, oh, I'm worried about this position. I'm just worried about not having a repeat winner in the NFC East since 2004, right? Like, for whatever reason, it's hard to win back-to-back years in this division. It's hard to get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that Super Bowl hangover is definitely real. Their schedule is tough. I mean, what I'm hopeful is they have enough leadership in that room with these veteran guys and with Jalen Hurts that they can overcome that hangover. But I agree, it's going to be tough. But there is one position on that defense that I'm really nervous about, and that's the linebacker position. I mean, Nakobe Dean, everyone is very, very excited about him. I am also. I mean, he was a stud at Georgia. But we've only seen the guy play like 30 snaps in the NFL. And that's who we're really resting all of our linebacker hopes on, is this guy. I mean, they bring in Nicholas Morrow. He's an okay player. He's probably going to pick up a lot of tackles. But outside of Nakobe Dean, you let Kazir White walk. I was okay with that. But you let TJ Edwards walk. That was a guy I thought was a little bit underrated last year. He was number 7 in the league in tackles, led the Eagles in tackles, was really their leader on that defense. I'm nervous about that linebacker position if Nakobe Dean's not the guy he was at Georgia.
Yeah, he should be. I think the only reason not to be worried about the linebacker position is if you don't value it, because the Eagles don't seem to show a lot of value in it, right? But still, it is important, and it should be important. No one said that TJ Edwards wasn't a good player last year. Got him a contract, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if Nakobe Dean can play or not. The only visual evidence I have from him is he really didn't make an impact to where they even thought about playing him last year. And just in the OTAs, and I was talking to Elliot Short Parks and actually and I forget who else that covers the team, but just watching practice, players stand out, right? Guy speed stands out, constantly just kind of being around the ball, even in non-padded practices, right? But like guys stand out, as you would expect, even in a non-padded practice. The Kobe Dean never stood out, never stands out, never stood out. And actually, is it Christian Ellis?
Yeah.
There's a linebacker that all I've heard from everybody that covers the team is look out for this guy. He might actually be able to play. He stands out. He really does. So, yeah, I mean, if you told me at the end of the season if we're doing this again, Bill, and you had said, "Man, the Kobe Dean really isn't the answer. We need to find a linebacker," I wouldn't be surprised at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Now you're right. I mean, and that's a position the Eagles definitely haven't valued it over the years, but we'll see how things play out there. But they do make some good moves this offseason. I was okay with the offseason they had in light of where we thought they were going to be with salary cap and all the players they had in free agency. I was happy with the offseason that they did have. I mean, who are you most excited about? Some of these new players they brought in, whether draft picks or free agents, who are you most excited to see?
Man, it's a good question because they really did. It's almost when what I love to do after the draft is I love to read the report cards and read the analysis of what all the analysts say about the team's draft and this team's draft and that team's draft. And then if you go back and you read the old ones, they're wrong on a fairly consistent basis to where it's like, oh, what a great draft this team had. And then you look at it like, oh, it didn't really pay off. So who the hell knows what this draft is going to look like this year? But Howie really seems to have a knack of filling holes on the team. And just when you think it's like, I mean, I remember quite a number of people that covered the team that was saying like, yeah, this might be one of these step back years, or this might be one of these years where you might have to realize like you're not going all in for it. And there's a difference between going all in, which is signing old guys and literally just trying to get every player that you can, which very rarely do teams do, than what the Eagles did, which is say, hey, we were just in the Super Bowl. Damn, we almost just won the Super Bowl. Let's make the team better. And you were going to lose Hargrave. You were going to lose Sayamalu. You weren't going to be able to keep everybody. That's the nature of the NFL. But getting Swift for a guy that not only running the football, and they like to use a rotation anyway, but not only running the football, but you might finally have a weapon out of the backfield in the receiving game. And so I would say that I'm most excited about seeing what DeAndre Swift looks like in the receive, just as their RB1 and in the receiving game, because I feel like they haven't had a really good receiving running back. Darren Sproles was good, but he also wasn't an every down back. I think it makes it when I say that I want Jalen Hurts to run the ball a little bit less, I think they can use Swift in the passing game to kind of help those concerns.
That was exactly what I was going to say earlier when we were talking about it, because that's what I'm most excited to see is what DeAndre Swift is going to bring from a receiving perspective from that backfield, because I was looking at the numbers from last year. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and Kenny Gainwell all combined for 48 receptions total. Gainwell had the most at 23. Swift had 48 himself last year. And the year before that, he had 62. And as a rookie, he had 46. I mean, this is a guy who can add that element from the backfield, which when we talk about Jalen Hurts, where do you replace that 50 yards of offense a game? Can you get DeAndre Swift involved? And then there's another guy out of that backfield that I was excited that they brought in, assuming he stays healthy. You probably know who I'm going to talk about, is Rashad Penny. I mean, this is a guy who's played 42 games in the last 5 years. He's averaging about 8 games a year. But Johnny, when he's healthy, he's averaging 5.7 yards a carry. I mean, to put that into perspective, you look at some of the stud running backs in the NFL. Derrick Henry last year, 4.8. His best year ever was 5.4. Dalvin Cook is only 4.7. His best year ever is 5.0. You look at this guy, Rashad Penny, for his career, he's 5.7. I mean, if he could stay healthy behind that offensive line, man, that would be scary.
Yeah, for everybody that plays fantasy football, at least I do this. You end up drafting a running back that you know is not going to be valuable for 16 games, but you know there's going to be 3 or 4 weeks where
they're going to go off.
They're going to go off, they're going to start, and they're going to go off, and like that's part of the reason why you draft them. I love having those guys, and that's Howie Roseman with Penny, signing Penny, because I mean we would be silly to think that he's going to stay healthy and he's going to be their every down back because he's never really done it. But if they're going to be a pocket, maybe it's towards the playoffs, maybe it's in the regular season, and they're not going to have to overuse him. He's the most dynamic back that they have. So I mean, who the hell knows? Who knows how? I mean, it's really you have nothing to lose and you have everything to gain. And even if it's for 4 or 5 games and he gets injured and then he comes back and he plays another 4 or 5 games later, it's so worth it. And it's so exciting to think when you look at this offense. Very quickly, you've went from not having a lot of scummy. There was a time at the end of Carson Wentz's last year. I was at people are like, he doesn't need wide receivers. They're fine. It's like, what are you talking about? They don't have any weapons on offense. Man, they have so many different places that Jalen can go. So it's their offense is going to be good this year. And Penny was a hell of an acquisition.
Yeah, and he was kind of the theme of the offseason is these low-risk, high-reward moves for Howie. I mean, Penny's a year deal. DeAndre Swift only has 1 year left on his deal. All these free agents they signed on that defensive side of the ball, all 1-year deals. So I kind of like it. You'd hope some of them pan out. They're all not going to pan out, but if even a few of them do, it's been a success. And you mentioned earlier that you were a little nervous about our wide receiver core. The other move that Howie made was bringing in that Olamide Zaccheaus, that wide receiver from Atlanta. And I like that to give Quez Watkins some competition in training camp because I know Nick Sirianni came out and said, hey, Quez Watkins, we were happy with the year he had. It was a step back. I mean, it was not what you would expected from our wide receiver 3 this year. But Zaccheaus on a bad Falcons team with really some sporadic quarterback play. They had Mariota. They had Ritter at some points. I mean, the guy did have 40 catches, over 500 yards. So I'm interested in seeing that battle between him and Quez.
Yeah, and I probably didn't bring up his name because I don't know how to pronounce his name yet. I know he's a local guy, but good job on the
St. Joe's prep guy. Well, I got yelled at, Johnny. I did a video on Instagram, and I said, I'm going to butcher his name, and then people DM me like, how do you disrespect him not knowing his name? So I learned it. Olamide Zaccheaus.
Well, I mean, so you write it out phonetically, and you say it a couple of times, and then you don't even worry about the spelling anymore until after you totally have it down.
Exactly.
And then you can get the spelling down. Quez Watkins didn't impress me at all. And everybody that tried to tell me last year that Quez Watkins was fine as a number 2 receiver before they traded for A.J. Brown, I was like, are you insane? Oh, well, the Eagles are very happy with Quez Watkins. They say a lot of things. Look at their actions when it goes to what they're doing. And like you had said, I mean, would anybody be surprised if Quez was the 4th or 5th wide receiver to start the season or in the middle of the season? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. So, yeah, I mean, it's a hole, and it's a little bit easier because you have Goddard, and you don't want to take away too much from A.J. Brown's targets because he's kind of
he gets a little upset.
Pissed. Oh man, he's something else. But they're in a good spot. Also, and I don't know if you're going to ask me about the draft picks, but to be excited, and it goes with the theme, like you were saying, low risk, high reward. Well, how about just getting great value out of both of your first round draft picks? Nolan Smith could have been a 10-ish pick, and he goes to the bottom of the first round. And Jalen Carter, listen, the kid physically and athletically he could have been the number 1 pick. So a lot of upside with these kids.
I'm hoping Jalen Carter, we're going to be talking about him in a few years like they did Warren Sapp. How Warren Sapp fell down the draft board and look where he ended up. But going into the draft, I was doing a bunch of videos on our Instagram, and I was saying I either wanted them to get Jalen Carter, and if he wasn't there, to take Nolan Smith. I could not believe they got both of these freaking guys.
And Smith has been, when we talk about catching people's eyes in OTAs and stuff, Smith is one of these guys that catches your eye. He's got a motor that never stops. He's undersized, but that's kind of what the league is right now. You don't get a lot of 280-pound defensive ends anymore. So and he doesn't have to step right in. He doesn't have to play a ton of snaps because you're already decently deep at that position. And, he can play a limited amount of snaps, and he can really kind of learn while still getting a lot of meaningful reps. He's been awesome. And as far as Jalen Carter, I had somebody that had said to me that he's more worried about Jalen Carter in having success and then that blowing up his head. Because part of what you heard at Georgia, and I'm only going on reports of what I read. I don't know anybody firsthand at Georgia, was that he was difficult to coach. He was the star athlete, and he knew it, and he just was difficult to coach. So he wasn't a big fan of the coaches. All right, coaches weren't the biggest fans of him. But if we can have the issue of being like, oh, I'm worried about Jalen Carter because he turned into the superstar, that's probably a good problem to have, I would say, man.
Yeah, and if there's any organization I think that could handle it, Dom DeSandro down there, the Eagles, I mean, they're going to do a good job taking care of this guy. And he's going to have all his buddies with him. I mean, he's got Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis. And that's what I'm so excited about, too, is they got 4 guys who are absolute studs on one of the best defenses in college history a couple years ago. You figure if you play the odds, one of these guys has to turn out to be an all-pro player.
Right. Yeah, one has to turn out to be a Fletch, kind of like I'm not going to go retired number jersey, but like that's what you're thinking when you draft one of these guys, and you're hoping that guy is the kind of the glue for everybody else. Remember when Howie used to reach on Jalen Reagor, TCU, player from UCLA? He's watching too many Pac-12 games on Saturday night. Right. And I remember specifically, and I'll credit WIP to this, because people would call in and say, just draft the players from Alabama and Georgia. What are you doing? So we started drafting the players from Georgia. And, yeah, draft the good players. Draft the best athletes. Draft the big guys, the best guys coming out of high school and the college. Get the best athletes. This is the NFL. And he started doing that. And we'll see how these guys end up turning out. But it's been a nice change from Howie Roseman.
I remember that year when they took Reagor over Justin Jefferson. That was also the year they drafted Jalen Hurts, which turned out to be a great draft pick. But when they drafted Hurts, as like everybody else, I was shocked. So I went back and I watched the LSU Alabama game, and I'm looking to see if I could see things about Jalen Hurts. And I'm seeing this Justin Jefferson just jumping off the freaking screen in the first half. I think he had 200 yards, 4 touchdowns. It's like, how do you not take this guy?
Right. Yeah, it was 51-10 or something that game. I know
crazy.
LSU gave it to him. Yeah, so you obviously watched that game watching Jalen Hurts. Hopefully you watched that game watching Jalen Hurts. You didn't see Justin Jefferson. Yeah, it's a huge miss. I thought Hurts was a bad pick, and I thought Landon Dickerson was not a smart pick because of his injury history. And so far, man, so great. I mean, that for a second round pick, that guy. I mean, he's a really, really good player.
Yeah, I was concerned too, and I thought they were drafting him to maybe take over for Kelsey.
Center, yeah.
Then I thought they were drafting Juergens, which they probably still did, to take over for Kelsey. But Kelsey just keeps coming back, which is great. He's still playing at a high level. And then, we're going to wrap up soon, but that's another battle we're going to have to see in training camp. That right guard position. Is it going to be Juergens? Is it going to be this new guy that they just got, this Tyler Steen? It's another good battle.
Yeah, and Kelsey was asked about Juergens playing right guard, and he said if anybody can do it, it's this guy. He complimented him, and then he let you know that he was skeptical if a guy that size, because of Jason's size, can do it. Brian Baldinger also said, he said it on my show actually, when he was talking about Lane Johnson, because you go from Seumalo, who, but he's not 360 pounds, but he's every bit of 320 or whatever he's listed at, right?
They're listed as similar sizes, him and Juergens, but it's impossible.
So I think Seumalo is the guy that lies 15 pounds the other way, and Juergens lies 15 pounds the other way. So because I think he said he was 290. Like Kelsey in the interview said he was 290 or 295. And then he was quick to point out, but he's going to be playing during the season at a bigger weight. So in other words, last time he saw him, he probably needed to put up 15 pounds for the season. But what Baldy had said was that Lane Johnson is not going to be happy if he's got 2 little guys lining up next to him. I mean, you think about the success, even though Seumalo didn't get a lot of shine from it, he affects Kelsey and he affects Lane Johnson. If that guard in between the center and the right tackle is too light, isn't holding up his end either in pass blocking or run blocking, it affects both players. Kelsey now has to worry more about what's going on to his right. Lane Johnson has to worry about inside help and things like that. So it's I'm glad you brought it up, because it is something interesting to watch. And I think the Eagles are very skeptical, and I think the Steen guy was drafted specifically with the idea that he could play at guard starting the season.
Yeah, and most of the guys, the draft experts, are saying that Steen projects more as a guard than a tackle, even though he played tackle in college. But we will see. But it'll be an interesting training camp battle. And that's really the only question mark on that offense. I mean, everywhere else on that offense is just stud after stud.
Yeah, and they even have pretty decent depth. I mean, if you start losing starters, like remember the year Jamone Brown had to play and they had guys off the street. I think Sua Opeta, that's where they found him, where they were literally playing like their fourth string offensive lineman.
So many injuries that year.
Yeah, like if you lose that many guys, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. But if you lose a starter, the Eagles are well positioned to slide guys all over the place. So Bill, it's a weird feeling to go into a season where you have full confidence in your GM, you have confidence in the organization, you feel like you have a quarterback that is like has everything that you're looking for, both in intangibles and tangible things. I don't feel comfortable with it. I really don't. It's a weird feeling, but it's there.
Yeah, we're not used to it, but we'll see how it all plays out, man. We will see. I'm excited. It's like August can't get here soon enough. I hate this time of year. This is the slowest time for the NFL right now.
Yeah, we got a month till training camp.
Yeah, I had Harry Mays on recently, and he said too. He goes, right now is if you're talking about anything that's newsworthy with the NFL, it's because probably something bad happened. You know, the GMs are hoping that the phone doesn't ring because this is when you want your guys not to be in the news.
It's the dead period. It's the dead period. I know that Hassan Reddick was over in one of the John Gannode, who works for the Eagles. He just got married, and he was over on his honeymoon. And I saw on social media he was in Italy, and like he's like outside his villa or something. And Hassan Reddick is like walking by, and he's like, wait, like what? So he ends up hanging out with Hassan Reddick in Italy because he's vacationing. So the guys take the vacations. This is the time to do it. Jason Kelsey has a beer brawl in Sea Isle City. That's his idea of a vacation. And
you going down there tomorrow?
I am. Well, depending on when you're listening to this is I will be in Sea Isle City on Wednesday. Jason Kelsey has his event that benefits the Eagles Autism Foundation. That really is just like it's amazing. Travis Kelsey will be there. A bunch of his Eagle teammates will be there. It's like you just graduated from college and you're going to Sea Isle, and Jason Kelsey's Jason Kelsey's there, so it'll be cool.
Awesome, John. Well, I really appreciate you making the time to join us, and we'll have to have you back on when the season gets closer, and hopefully we'll be celebrating another successful season that finishes with a Super Bowl win this coming season. Let's hope.
All right, I'm going to hold you to it. I want to be back soon. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And as always, guys, thanks for listening, and go Birds.